Hello everybody, and welcome to this next installment in my ongoing effort to share my music collection. Today we'll be looking at another 8 records from my Broadway and Musicals collection. We'll start with this one, Tovarich. It stars Vivien Leigh and Jean-Pierre Aumont. So I listened to this and I liked it actually. I liked the music in it. The lyrics were good. It was funny. And basically, it's a 1963 musical play in 2 acts with a book by David Shaw and music by Lee Pockrass and lyrics by Anne Croswell. And there was a film version that was made in 1937 starring Charles Boyer and Claudette Colbert. And basically, the story is about a Russian prince and his wife who flee from the Russian Revolution to Paris. Now in Paris, they're both destitute and they're forced to take jobs under false identities as a butler and a maid in the household of a wealthy, rich American family. So the whole thing's kind of a musical comedy. You can look it up yourself. I was surprised. I enjoyed listening to it, and I enjoyed the lyrics and everything about it. So that's that. Let's go move on to the next one now. Well, here's a record that you probably have seen before. You probably know about, Camelot. It was a musical written by Lerner and Loewe, who wrote My Fair Lady, which is, in my opinion, one of the great musicals ever made. I really loved that musical. I just loved the tunes in it and the story, of course, which was written by, what's his name again? George Bernard Shaw, of course. Anyway, getting back to Camelot, this was their next musical after that, and it was a big hit. It came out in 1960. It was about King Arthur and Guinevere, and it took place in England. Of course, it's Lerner and Loewe. This was a very, very high-selling album. The original cast album was America's top-selling LP for 60 weeks. It has a lot of tunes in it, such as, for example, I Wonder What the King is Doing Tonight, The Simple Joys of Maidenhood, Camelot, Follow Me, How to Handle a Woman, If I Ever Would Leave You, and so on and so forth. There's a lot more tunes in here. Anyway, it's great. If you haven't listened to it, you should, if you like musicals. And so then that's it. So let's move on now. Okay, now Kiss Me Kate. This was a musical by Cole Porter, the great composer who composed so many great tunes. He was one of the great American composers, and many of his songs are just standards. But he wrote this musical, which is basically a musical version of William Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. The show proved to be Cole Porter's biggest hit, and went on to run for more than 1,000 performances on Broadway. In 1949, it won the first Tony Award presented for a Best Musical. Incidentally, in 2015, it was announced that the 1949 original cast recording, in other words, this recording, was inducted into the Library of Congress's National Recording Registries for the album's cultural, artistic, and/or historical significance to American society and the nation's audio legacy. It has tunes such as Another Opening, Another Show, Why Can't You Behave, So in Love, We Will Open in Venice, Tom, Dick, or Harry, Too Darn Hot, that's a classic one. I know Ella Fitzgerald did that. Always True to You in My Fashion, that's a great tune. Brush Up on Your Shakespeare, and They'll All Kowtow, that's a good one as well. So, if you haven't listened to this, I definitely think that it's a great one. So, let's move on. Showboat. Here's an interesting musical. This is also one of the greats, of course. The music was written by Jerome Kern and the book and lyrics by Oscar Hammerstein before he teamed up with Richard Rodgers. Now, you've probably seen this famous musical before. The musical follows the lives of the performers, stagehands, and dock workers on the Cotton Blossom, a Mississippi River showboat, over 40 years, from 1887 to 1927. Its themes include racial prejudice and tragic, enduring love. Got some good plot elements in it. It's got a bunch of classic songs in there. By the way, this was from 1927. It's a very early musical. Kind of changed the history of musical theater. Got a lot of classic tunes in it, such as Make Believe, Old Man River, Can't Help Lovin' That Man, Bill, After the Ball, and so on and so forth. So, if you're a fan of musical theater, you're already probably familiar with this album. If not, listen to it. It's great. You'll enjoy it. Aint Misbehavin. I picked this up one day, and I'm glad I did. Aint Misbehavin is a musical review. It's basically a tribute to the black musicians of the 1920s and 30s who were part of the Harlem Renaissance. The musical takes its title from the 1929 Fats Waller song Aint Misbehavin'. It was a time when Manhattan nightclubs like the Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom were the playgrounds of high society. So if you don't know who Fats Waller is, he was a great piano player and songwriter that wrote so many songs from the jazz age, like Aint Misbehavin', Honeysuckle Rose, so many great things. He was an incredibly dynamic performer and an incredible piano player as well. The songs on this include Aint Misbehavin', Tain't Nobody's Business, Honeysuckle Rose, Squeeze Me, Handful of Keys, I've Got a Feeling I'm Fallin', The Joint is Jumpin', Your Feet's Too Big, Keepin' Out of Mischief Now, Black and Blue, I'm Gonna Sit Right Down and Write Myself a Letter. I love that tune. It's a Sin to Tell a Lie. So many. Anyway, it's a fun album, and it's great to have all these excellent jazzy tunes. It's a good record. Let's move on. Flower Drum Song. Flower Drum Song was the 8th musical by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. Before, they had done so many other ones such as Oklahoma, Carousel, State Fair, South Pacific, The King and I, and so on and so forth. Basically, the music opened on Broadway in 1958, and it was actually made into a 1961 musical film as well. It was based on a 1957 novel, The Flower Drum Song, by Chinese-American author C.Y. Lee. It deals with issues having to do with Chinese immigrants to America and how traditional Chinese immigrants adapted to life in the New World and began to assimilate into American culture. I enjoyed this record, but I'll tell you, I was expecting more. You know, it was good enough. It just wasn't as great as I might have thought that it would have been, like South Pacific or something like that. So I haven't listened to it that many times. Maybe it'll grow on me. You can see here that it was directed by Gene Kelly. Let's move on. Hooray for Hollywood. Here's a record I got. Original soundtrack recordings from 42nd Street, Fashions of 1934, Dames, Gold Diggers of 1935, Hollywood Hotel, Gold Diggers of 1937, all these things. Musical numbers created and directed by Busby Berkeley, Harry Warren, Johnny Mercer, Richard Whiting, Sammy Fain, Irving Kahal, all these types of people. Basically, it's got a bunch of songs on it. It's just all songs, I guess, from movies, such as Hooray for Hollywood, The Continental, 42nd Street. So basically, these are all numbers from great musical films. Good record, if you ever get a chance. Final record we'll be looking at today is Jesus Christ Superstar. It's basically a musical, actually a 1970 rock opera, music by Andrew Lloyd Webber and lyrics by Tim Rice. You know, it was good. It had some nice moments to it. It was not my favorite musical, but it had its moments. Basically, it's really the story of Jesus and the story of the Passion and all that. I think my favorite song on here was Everything's All Right. Anyway, that's all we're going to look at today. In my next video, I might take a break from the Broadway musicals and do, let's say, 8 records from my jazz collection. Hope you'll join me for that. In the meantime, enjoy listening to your records and have a good day. Take care now.